VTubers, the silly little models that track your face and have become immensely popular over the last few years. Custom VTuber models can cost people thousands, but what if I wanted one and the summer internship money wouldn't really cut it? So, well, here's the story of how the intrusive thoughts went out. I mean, how I made a VTuber in 10 days, with zero experience. And also the video I've been procrastinating on since, April 2024. Day 0. I'm calling this Day 0 because I didn't actually make anything for the VTuber this day, just did a little research on how to make one. Before this challenge, my only experience making something similar was with the simple 2-frame PNG tuber, so I knew that making a VTuber would be a steep learning curve. But thankfully, during Day 0, I found some crucial VTuber making resources. I learned from Kapako Channel and Mariyume that VTuber models need to be cut up for rigging. Cutting can be more aptly described as layering, where a VTuber is basically a puppet with a bunch of moving pieces that need to be drawn separately so that they can move freely during the rigging stage. I also learned that the program Live2D Cubism is used to rig most VTubers. Basically, it makes them move. And that it has a 42-day free trial. So, of course, I was going to use that program for my VTuber. And, most importantly, I found Chuperco's VTuber rigging tutorial playlist. Before finding it, I was planning on following along to a 5-hour livestream VOD. So, I'm really glad I found something as streamlined as the tutorial series. Also, in hindsight, I definitely would not have been able to make the VTuber without Chuperco's tutorials. So if anyone's looking to rig a VTuber, I couldn't recommend her tutorials enough. Alrighty, so now on to Day 1, also known as sketching the VTuber. Going into the sketch, I already knew that the VTuber was going to be a Mysona, Kai, who I had recently redesigned in preparation for making the model. Sketching him was probably the easiest part of the process, but while drawing, I found it hard to stay with the style I was going for, because I thought making him look like more of a traditional VTuber would come in handy when rigging. But while sketching, I had trouble keeping to the thinner than normal liner and soft shading. All that said though, I think the sketch turned out pretty well for my art quality at the time, so here's the final sketch. Days 2 to 3 were spent drawing the VTuber art. My main struggles while drawing were trying to cut the model while dealing with Procreate's layer limit. Procreate is a wonderful drawing app, and I use it for 90% of my art, but it has one teensy-weensy issue. It has a layer limit. This wouldn't normally be an issue, since I don't use many layers for my art, but when making a VTuber, every single piece has to be on its own layer. And with the full quality canvas, there were only 28 layers available, which was not so compatible with my initial layer cutting plan of 76 layers. So, I ended up cutting the quality in half. Yep, KaiTuber 1.0 had half the quality from the outset. And don't worry, things only get worse from here. Oh, and some other mistakes my past self may or may not have made when drawing the model. We're forgetting that Procreate has a symmetry tool, making Kai have a permanent colon 3 mouth, and not making his upper eyelid thinner than the rest of his eye. These don't really sound like issues, right? But when rigging, they turned out to be really, really awful. Not drawing with symmetry meant that I couldn't do what normal riggers do and copy-paste the rigging from one side to the other. Instead, I had to rig every single part separately, even though the design is literally symmetrical. So that was great. Anyways, here's the final art. It exists. I didn't have to spend the next 6 days staring at this PNG. Nope, look at his eyes. How comforting. Now on to the remainder of the days. Days 4 to 9. Which I spent rigging the VTuber. Yippee! I don't have any rigging footage because I was not insane enough to record 40 hours of rigging for you guys, so you'll just have to see the scuffed progless clips I sent in a Discord channel with my friends. But not having footage is probably a good thing, because any professional riggers watching would likely die inside if they saw how I did it. Day 4. Most of Day 4 was spent finishing the art, but after the art was done, I spent 3 hours trying to rig Kai's eyes. The key word here is trying, because I decided to be a silly little goober and ignore the part of the tutorial that told you to set up warp deformers to skip straight to rigging, which is definitely not what you're supposed to do. So, after 3 torturous hours of rigging, I realized that I needed to redo everything. This marked the end of Day 4. When Day 5 rolled around, I was ready to do this right. Gone were the days, single day, of skipping steps in the tutorial, and it was finally time to get on with rigging the model correctly. First, I actually set up the warp deformer hierarchy this time, and got to work. Look at it, it's silly and aesthetic. After that, everything went well for like 30 more seconds, until I realized that auto mesh wasn't working. Mesh is basically this thing that lets you move around pieces of your model while rigging, by basically creating a grid of connected dots over each piece of your art. So auto mesh makes it so you don't have to manually click every single dot while rigging, and can simply move on to the actual animation part with ease. I didn't really understand this at that point, and still don't fully, so I made the executive decision to not try any harder to get auto mesh to work, and just manually mesh the entire thing. Because the tutorial said that that was an option, so why not? Whoa! I cannot explain to you how much extra time this added. Just, well, when we get to day 8, you'll be able to truly understand the horrors that this decision brought upon me. But for now, let's get back to rigging the eyes. Eye rigging went pretty chill, and I got around to rigging the eyebrows, though it was kind of hard to tuck the eye whites under my very thin eyelid art. All in all, it's crazy how much easier setting everything up correctly made it. Who could have known? Anyways, I have no video progress for this day because my past self decided to be silly and not record anything. Whoopsies. Days 6 and 7 were spent rigging the mouth. All I have from day 6 is this cursed image of Kai without teeth, and messages of me going insane about a specific far-fetched Pokemon card. So it's safe to say I got burnt out on the mouth and decided to finish it the next day. Day 7 was spent actually finishing the mouth rig. And though I suffered making mouth forms using a permanent colon 3 mouth, I think it went alright, so here's a little video of the mouth, eye, and eyebrow rigging. Day 8 was when the speedrunning really started, and I resolved to finish the head angles that day. In VTubing, there are 3 angles people rig: angle X, angle Y, and angle Z. In terms of a head turn, angle X is turning your head side to side, angle Y is turning it up and down, and angle Z is tilting your head side to side. When rigging my VTuber, I got lazy and did not rig an angle Z for anything. So yeah. The head rigging itself was pretty tedious, but the most annoying part was, of course, manually meshing it. This freaking mesh took me an hour to do. Which sounds okay, considering how long every other step had taken me thus far. But it literally took me an hour to do the first minute of the tutorial. Forget 60 seconds. Why not 60 minutes? All in all, after going insane clicking dots, I felt like I was at an all-time low with the model. Thankfully, after a bit of finagling, I finished up the head rigging. And I got so many cursed screenshots of bald Kai along the way. Yippee! Day 9 was when I had to do most of the heavy lifting. During this day, I decided to finish the entire model, which meant not only rigging the hair, but also adding body angles and finishing touches to it. First was my mortal enemy of meshing the hair, and after that, I had to make every single hair strand move. But look, it wiggles! Whoa! When it came to the body angles, I continued to ignore angle Z, and was so fed up with everything that I just did the bare minimum when it came to body rigging. But hey, he breathes now. Sentience? In this goofy little PNG? Huh? Oh, and also I rigged the wings. Woohoo! Day 10 was solely spent exporting the model, which may seem easy, but if you know anything about this process so far, it sure wasn't. Forget meshing as the most painful part of the process. Exporting it was definitely the worst part. If you've made a VTuber before, your reaction to this is probably just, huh? That's like really easy. And it would be. It sure would be. But I rigged the whole thing with a MacBook, not a PC. And VTube Studio, the program everyone imports VTubers into, was made for PCs, so quite some suffering was in store for me that day. I woke up at 10 a.m., feeling whimsical, and easily plopped the model into VTube Studio. Setting the model up there went equally as easy, and within the hour I'd gotten it to work. But why then, you may ask, did it take me until 3 p.m. to get the model from VTube Studio into the streaming and recording app OBS? Why? Well, as I said, VTube Studio was made for PCs, so the options it has for mirroring into OBS just don't work on Mac. Or I think one of them did, but it ended up looking like 140 DPI, and I was just not having it. Which meant that I had to spend hours scouring Reddit for a workaround. And after those hours of suffering, I finally found the answer. This silly little OBS NDI program that I have no idea how it works, but it does. At this point, I was just not going to question it and take the win. So after all that, the VTuber was finally done. Oh, also a few months later, I went back to the model and polished it a little bit by finally adding an angle Z and re-rigging the wings to look a tad less scuffed. But yeah. The moment you've all been waiting for. Whoa, it's a VTuber! Look at this. It can move, hair can move. Yeah. Alright, let me zoom out for a second. Try to get the whole body in the frame. And look. Guy's real. Look at him. I'm real. This is crazy. Wow. That's a VTuber, if I've ever seen one. Yeah. It's a VTuber. Yay. Alright, so after doing all that, what's my conclusion? Don't do this at home, kiddos. Or do. It's your choice. Though, personally, I wouldn't recommend this level of suffering to anyone. Maybe if you do it over a few months, VTuber making is manageable. But 10 days is a bit much, especially with no prior experience. Did I improve at anything through this challenge? Maybe. But I'm definitely still a long way off from making a truly professional looking VTuber. Maybe I'll make a KaiTuber 2.0 in the future. But for now, I like the scuffed look of this model.